report. If your tribal police department is unable due to whatever circumstances, they will direct you to the sheriff's office, and you can always call the local sheriff's office too. So the key thing is call. Let us know.
Also, feel free after the panel discussion to approach any of these handsome gentlemen. They're here to help. They're here to make sure information is being shared, the correct information about missing persons cases. The next question is for Ranger Troy. It's all you. What if my loved one goes missing from a national or state park?
Good afternoon. So, if they went missing in a national or state park, the response or what would happen wouldn't be all that different if they went missing from somewhere else other than we would be involved. So you can report a missing person to National Park Service or the state park. We would work closely with our allied agencies to respond. We don't handle those in a vacuum by ourselves, of course. So we would work with our local sheriff's office to do a couple of things. If they went missing in the national park and we knew they went missing there, we would start a search and rescue response. Depending on how that went, we could lend ourselves to help investigatively with our allied agencies for long-term investigative support, media outreach, that type of thing. We have some resources to lend a hand, but we work closely with our allied agencies to respond.
Thank you so much. Chief Ramos, what if my loved one goes missing in another state or from another reservation?
We have the ability to contact those other agencies on other states. So we would take the information and make that contact for you. And trying to get as much information, we would conduct an initial investigation, reach out to those jurisdictions, have them reach out to you because they're the ones that would be looking into and following up those missing persons cases. All right?
Thank you so much. Sheriff Grodon, what types of questions will I be asked when I report someone missing?
All right, good afternoon. First of all, there's a standard DOJ form for recording a missing person and reporting that and entering into the database. There are a variety of questions that will be asked. Some of the most important ones are the last known whereabouts, where were they expected to be going to, where should they be, and any other information that might indicate their whereabouts. We're also going to be looking for identifying information, clothing description, physical description, jewelry, tattoos, and so on, current photograph, any vehicle descriptions that may be associated with that person, known associates or friends, and then at-risk factors might be their age, whether they're young or elderly, if they have any significant medical history, mental health history that may put them at risk, social media accounts, phone information, and again, any information that might indicate their whereabouts. And that's just a quick summary of some of the types of information we're going to give, but those forms are very extensive, and there's a lot of information that's important for us to obtain in order to help guide our investigation. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheriff. Sheriff Hansel, this one hits home. What types of questions will I be asked if my loved one goes missing from a reservation or a rancheria?
So it's a really important question, and the best thing we can do is you know your loved one better than any of us do. And you know your tribal land and tribal partners and who associates with your loved one that's missing. So what we want to know is whereabouts. Whereabouts were they? Where were they going? What are their friend networks? Where would they hang out? And who could they talk to? Because we want to talk to those same people. Because when someone goes missing, sometimes it's a voluntary missing because of circumstance they want to run away. Sometimes they get caught up in addiction and they're trapped in addiction and they're somewhere where they just are not in the right state of mind. Sometimes it's mental illness. Sometimes it's suicide. Sometimes they're lost because they went for a hike. They went for a hunt. So all those things, we're going to want to know about them. And if it's tribal land, you know, we know rural Northern California, there's a lot of places to get lost, right? Where we want to go, we want to be left alone. And sometimes we just would want to go and ping their cell phone or something like that. Well, we don't get that opportunity in a lot of tribal areas because we don't have that cell coverage up here. So we're going to want to know, based upon your knowledge and your history with them, where they could possibly be. And only you can provide that information with us. And so that's the kind of things that you need to be sharing with us and providing to us so we can follow up. And also, what have you done? Who have you called? What have they said about where people have last seen your loved one? It's all very, very important information that needs to be shared. And again, appreciate the time and the question.
Thank you. Thank you. Sheriff Dowdy. Oh, you kind of answered that other one. Yeah. You can take a seat. Sheriff Dowdy, you're back. What must local law enforcement do after receiving a missing persons report?
So one thing you ought to be aware of is that when you report a missing person to us, that takes priority over other crimes such as property crimes and those type of things. So we'll start working on it immediately. The other thing that you also need to be aware of, that we'll be taking the information that you provide and enter it into multiple databases. And in some cases, we have to have that information entered within the first 2 hours of the report. One of those databases is a missing person database. So in other words, if somebody, if one of your loved ones you report them missing and another agency, another law enforcement agency has to have contact with them, then it'll pop that they're a missing person, and then that comes back to us so we can notify the family and provide some relief there. The other thing that we'll be doing, if the missing person is from another area, Sheriff Johnson and I are currently working a case together. We're going to contact that other agency and notify them of the missing person as well.
Thank you, Sheriff Dowdy. Sheriff Scott, make sure you lift it up higher so I can hear you. Which law enforcement agency will be responsible for investigating a missing person report?
So it's going to be their place of residence, typically. So if you call in a neighbor or something like that, a loved one, kind of consider where they live and where their home is and try to contact that jurisdiction. Of course, if you're from out of the area and you need to contact your local jurisdiction to get help, that's fine. They'll typically contact us, but primarily it's going to be their place of residence.
Thank you. I'm trying to make sure I'm not standing under that speaker. Sheriff Hansel, what, if any, information will be shared with the tribal government if a tribal citizen goes missing?
Another good question. This is one of the things that Mary and I are trying to work out with DOJ, because right now, unless we ask or unless the loved one is letting us know what tribal affiliation a person may be, we don't have that on our form. We don't have an automatic referral to a tribal authority. Much like we would if there's a child abuse case, we automatically send that to certain jurisdictions. And so sometimes we know our tribal members live throughout the state and you want to keep track of them even though they're off reservation. We want to be able to provide that information directly to the tribes as long as we know that tribal affiliation. So right now in Humboldt County and other jurisdictions, if we know someone has an affiliate with the tribe, then we can work with tribal police. We can work with tribal government to try and help locate the missing person, but it's all based upon relationship and our ability to communicate with our tribal partners and tribal police. So that's something that can and should be done. Is it mandated by the law? No, it's not. And is it automatically referred? No, but that's something that we are working on and we acknowledge that we need to fix. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheriff Hansel. Chief Ramos, after I have reported someone missing, what should I do next? How do I work with law enforcement?
I try to think about that question in two parts. The first part is we know who's at risk, right? Our family members and our friends who are at risk. And we need to pay attention before they go missing. A lot of times we aren't watching, they're not paying attention, we're not getting to know the new people that our risk folks are hanging out with and what they're doing, their changes in behavior, right? Because that information is critical when they do go missing, because that only provides more information, more leads that we can follow, and we can identify possible suspects if there's a criminal activity or possible places or locations that we can follow up and hopefully locate these individuals. One of the big things that I was asked to also discuss is rumors play a big part in this as well, and every rumor matters. But we also want it to be that there's a liaison from the group, from the family, that one person is presenting that information. Too many times we have too many people involved, and that creates a chaotic situation because we're not being able to get the accurate information that's trying to be presented to us. So we ask that if there's a group or a family, that they choose someone from that family to speak for the family and speak to the police, whether it be tribal or whether it be the sheriff, the local sheriff's office. So that every rumor matters, but we need it to be in a fashion that's reasonable and that we can obtain that information accurately. All right.
Thank you, Chief Ramos. Again, just emphasizing how important it is that when a family member has gone missing, there's a lot of activity trying to find that individual, and the importance of having a spokesperson for the family to be able to communicate efficiently and effectively with our law enforcement partners. Sheriff Grodon, this one is for you again. This one we get a lot of questions at the DOJ about. It's about how are missing person searches organized? Who's in charge of the search efforts and what's involved?
Okay, I'm going to try to address this from like an area search, like we typically do a search and rescue. Typically these searches would be conducted in the last known or probable location based on the evidence we've discovered throughout our investigation. The key with these searches is they need to be done in an organized fashion. Everyone that's involved in the search needs to participate in a briefing so they understand what's going on and what their specific assignment is. A couple reasons for that. Number one, we need to account for personnel, everyone involved in the search. A lot of times these are conducted in remote areas. We want to make sure that we know who is participating in the search and account for all this personnel once the search is concluded. We want to ensure that a detailed search is conducted, that the whole area that we intend to search is actually searched. And normally we do that with by utilizing certain search patterns, and everyone has an assigned area that they need to search. And we also need to make sure that we do, if items are discovered during the search, that we do preserve potential evidence items, and that's very important. And in doing these searches, they might be a ground search where you have people walking, they might involve aircraft, drones, canines, especially trained canines, and then also depending on the scope of the search, it might involve mutual aid from other agencies. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheriff. Where's that speaker? So Sheriff Hansel mentioned being able to ping somebody's phone. Sheriff Johnson, can you talk about, can law enforcement track a missing person's phone?
Sure. The answer to that is yes, sometimes, and maybe. It's really dependent. Typically, the answer is yes. We can ping somebody's cell phone or track their cell phone. However, it's not, I need to explain to you, there's various variables that come with that. So, for instance, I have a smartphone like many people do, but I keep the location services turned off on my phone just because that's how Google and other people track your information and send you ads. So I don't like that, so I keep it off. And if I have it off and I go missing and you're trying to ping my phone, you're not going to be able to ping my phone because I have that particular service cut off. typically I know people don't turn that off. If I use Google Maps, I have to turn it back on, right? So typically people don't turn that off, so in that case, yes, we would be able to ping your phone. If you have a burner phone or a phone that's less sophisticated, we may or may not be able to ping that phone. But here's the thing that you need to know about that, because I get that questions too when somebody goes missing. It's not like the movies, folks. It's not like where somebody goes missing and we just automatically have the giant screen like this, or the map, and when that phone's turned off or on, a ping comes up and we're out tracking that person. It's very sophisticated, it's very labor intensive, and we have to write actual warrants to be able to do that with the companies. And here's why. There's the United States Constitution, and especially the Fourth Amendment against illegal searches and seizures and rights of people's property. So if Sheriff Hansel goes missing voluntarily because he just wants to get away, and whoever his service provider was, let's say it's AT&T, just automatically gave me access to that, it'd be a violation of his rights. So I have to, as law enforcement, if he's entered as a missing person, I have to do an investigation, provide probable cause if there's a reason that I need to ping his phone and look for him, and that requires a search warrant, detectives, investigation, and time. So it's not just so immediate, it's not as easy as we'd like it to be, and it's definitely not like NCIS shows you when you watch a version of their show.
Thank you, Sheriff Johnson. The next questions are actually going to be directed to Captain Roberts of the CHP. And I'm going to kind of collapse your questions. So we've heard about the Feather Alert and the missing persons alert systems like the Amber Alert. We wonder if you can tell us the difference between those alert systems and if they're handled differently by your office. We're also wanting to know if you can talk to us about missing persons flyers.
I'll start with the flyers. Well, actually, I'll start with the way they're reporting of the missing persons. It's going to be the investigating agencies. One of these gentlemen's detectives or their deputies is going to call our office. And the way they're going to get through that is through their dispatch. They're going to get through CHP's dispatch. My office does not have a public-facing office. So a lot of people say, can the public call my office and do a missing person report? They cannot. And the other thing that has to happen is that person has to be entered into the MUP system. We talked about that earlier. That's the Missing Identified Person Syndrome, or system. It has to be entered into that for my shop to even start. We're going to then ask the investigating agencies several questions. Specifically to the Feather Alert, we're going to ask, is the missing person an indigenous woman or a person? If they check the box yes on that, we just continue down our process. We're going to ask, is the investigating agency determined that the person is missing under unexplainable or suspicious circumstances? And they're going to have to explain those to us what those are. We're not going to critique them. That's not our job. They're the investigating agency on scene. We understand that they're dealing with the family and the intensity that they're dealing with. I'm in a protected office in Sacramento in a controlled environment, but we're here to provide a service for our allied agencies, and that's what we're going to do. Our main goal is to get the missing person to our system. And then we're going to ask, do you have any information that's available to help identify them? And then that could be anything from a vehicle, any last seen. We talked about the cell phone. I have several cases where we did have a cell phone ping for somebody that was missing. We were able to follow that to a location, and that's where they concentrate the search. So we utilize that technology as well. Then we are going to also ask if they exhausted all of their resources that they've put towards to find this person. What does that mean? We're not going to critique that either. You're going to have some agencies that I've worked with, like LAPD, LASO, very large entities. They're going to have lots of people that they can put forth to this. One of the cases I was talking about earlier is, I just mentioned it was up in Truckee. We had the FBI involved. We had Placer County Sheriff's Department. We had several sheriff's departments, and they exhausted all of their resources, and we were able to use ours as well. We have air support. We have CHP officers throughout the state. We're able to help provide searches as well. and we're able to provide technologies. We also utilize social media. We have our own social media at CHP Alerts. We have a Facebook that we just started. We have Instagram, and we use Twitter to get our flyers out. And then we're, like I said, mentioned, we have to do the MUPs. You have in the back of the room, that is an actual, what our feather alert looks like. We utilize that process because we've learned from our mistakes. We've had the Amber Alert system for over 20 years. It's very successful. And we used the media, if you will. When we first did our flyers, they were, lack of a better term, they were a train wreck. They didn't help out, they didn't help the public. So we utilize this form now to make our flyers. Some of the other alerts, and I think one of the questions was the alerts we have. We just mentioned the feather alert. I also have the Amber Alert, which is for the criteria of 17 years or under, has a mental or physical disability, goes, it has to have an abduction, or they'll have to have under suspicious circumstances as well. If it doesn't meet that criteria, we also have the what we call an EMA, which is the Endangered Missing Advisory, which goes up from the 17 or younger. It goes further up in the age bracket. Then we have our silver alerts. Our silver alerts is for the any type of elderly, and they'll have, again, they have to meet the criteria for us to do a silver alert. We've also dealt with, we have a blue alert for law enforcement. If we have information we can for law enforcement that's been injured. And then we also have the new one that came into effect into law 2023 as well, with the yellow alert, which is hit and run with follow-up. It's a fatal hit and run, has certain and very specific criteria that we utilize to launch those alerts. I believe I hit all your questions? The flyer is, to make that flyer, it goes through this process that I just went through. And the example of the flyer is back there at the back of the room. That's the actual feather alert. What it would look like, that was what it looks like on our social media. It'll go out on, like, again, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. That's it. And we'll actually have a link. If you have a cell phone, we'll have a hyperlink. You can click on that. If it hits you, if we alert your phone with the EAS, when has anybody had their phone go off with an alert or anything like that up here? If it's from the CHP and we do that, we'll have a hyperlink. You can click on that hyperlink. It will take you directly to the flyer. It gets you the information, the picture, and we've had very, very good success. It's called a wireless emergency alert, or OEA.
Thank you so much, Captain Roberts. If you visit Captain Roberts in the back corner, he has all the information for the social media, I don't know what they're called, handles, so that you can actually subscribe to them and receive the alerts. So I know I did that on Facebook and Twitter, so I'm not on the gram. All right, thank you so much. Also, MUPS is the Missing Unidentified Persons section at the DOJ, and they are actually located today. If you have any questions about flyers or who's in the database or how come my family member's not in the database, they're right in the back corner and they're happy to answer any of your questions. Okay, so we're down to our final 3 questions, and then we'll open it up to the audience. This one is Sheriff Dowdy. What if you find my loved one and they don't want anyone to know where they are? We kind of talked about voluntary missing, but what happens if you find them and they don't want anybody to know?
About all that we'll be able to provide in a situation like that is to let you know that we do know where their whereabouts. But again, it becomes a situation, especially when you're talking about people having restraining orders and those type of things that are out there. Sometimes people they have a right to go off by themselves and take a break, right? So we want to make sure that right is protected as well as, but on the flip side of it is we also want the family to know that they have been located, but we won't provide any additional information.
Thank you. Sheriff Scott, what if my loved one returns and then goes missing again? Does law enforcement treat their missing person report differently?
No, we're gonna treat it just the same. If reported a loved one missing and they've returned, we'll take them out of the system. from the missing persons system, and if they come up missing again, you report that. We'll do the same exact process to put them in the system and start looking for them again. That would be the normal process.
Okay. The last question before we open up to the audience is for Sheriff Johnson. How can family and friends help find their missing loved ones?
Okay, great. And that's the $1 million question and why we're here, right? We all want to learn to connect and work together and help and not be contradictory of each other. I got to tell you, I'll give you full disclosure and acknowledgement, and this is the same for all of us up here. When you're dealing with a law enforcement officer in a case of a missing or murdered person, you never know who you get. Like any other organization, we have officers who communicate really well, and we have officers that don't communicate very well. We have young type A officers who sometimes rub you the wrong way, and we have very caring and compassionate other detectives and officers who might be the ideal person. First and foremost, I would tell you it's always about relationships when things work well, whether that's the relationships between us, between our other allied agencies, between you and us, or between you within your tribe as well. If you are not getting the service or have that connection or getting where you're supposed to be with your investigator or your officer who's initially serving you, then we need to know, and we'll make that right for you, because the last thing I want is a family that's grieving or in trauma or emotionally distraught over their missing loved one is to be treated poorly by law enforcement or not be communicated well. So now what you heard from our partners was, one, it was you'll know the person way better than we will. You'll know the terrain way better than we will. So you can't hold information to your chest. You need to lay the cards on the table for the investigators, whether it's right or wrong or whether it's minute, you think it means something or not. The other thing is, like the other sheriff said, or the chief said here, was if there's a group of you, a family or an organized group helping look for this person or concerned about this person, pick one person to be the liaison to work with us. Because the last thing we need is 27 different phone calls coming in on a daily basis repeating the same thing, taking us away from that investigation when we could be being more productive. It's easier if I have one single person to contact and relay that information to, and that person can be the liaison for the rest of you. So I wrote notes on my hands here as I was listening to my partner. So that's hugely important in getting it timely and making that investigation work. How you can also be a part of is, here's a don't for you, and this is a big one, and this is a tough one that we all work with and navigate well. Social media is not always your friend when it comes to your missing person or your loved one. If you start putting out false or what you think is true information turns out to be false or too much information which could compromise an investigation we're doing on social media, it causes us huge problems. It delays the investigation, and it may or may not lead to our ability to locate your missing person. So try to temper that social media. I get it. We understand that you're grieving, you're emotionally a wreck because of this. You want to help find this person, but going out there and blasting everything on social media is often detrimental to the case. So I would encourage you to work closely with that investigator or that officer who is working the case to try to get the same message out on social media and withhold some important information which may not need to go out there. Those are the best tips I can give you. I can tell you, since I get to close, certainly appreciate y'all coming together and looking at this. I heard the theme up here when I was sitting there listening to the other speakers was, to me, try to bury, if you've had a bad experience or you have had the misfortune of not getting your case solved or work like you should, let's try to bury all that and move forward from here, because I know that each one of my partners here would like to make this a better system, to serve you better, to solve cases. We don't like it when cases are unsolved either. Every one of us has family and friends that either have a mental health disorder, drug addiction, or some type of criminal issue as well. So we're not unsympathetic to the situations when they come into us. That's what this symposium's about, is trying to make it better, and we're here to do our part with that.
Okay, so we're gonna go, we have some time to take a couple questions from the audience, and Monix is gonna help moderate. Oh, I think one over here. But, wait. I just need to make sure everybody is aware. Our law enforcement partners did come here to answer these questions, but you misunderstand, they cannot answer any questions involving an active case that could compromise their investigation, and so they will not be able to answer any questions about any specific cases. So if you can, when you're presenting your questions, make them general in nature so that they can do their best to provide you the information you're requesting. So again, no active cases. Thank you.
So do we have any hands? Here we go.
Gary Risling. I'm the father to Emily Risling, and I'm Hoopa, Yurok, and Karuk. I've got some questions that go for clarity, and that is how do I get all you guys working together? It was amazing to see how many sheriffs, elected officials that we have here in this conference. That's saying something. But when I went around asking, how did you all get here? You come on your own? Was this a result of some law enforcement organization that got you together for the turnout? What was it? Most of you said the Attorney General's office reached out and contacted us and brought you here. Then I started looking at the next level. How many board of supervisors do we have here for the county? How many legislators do we have here for the state or their representative? How many state senators? How many U.S. senators? What do we got to get them all together? And that's important, because if you're going to get movement and you're going to address it, you need money, you need dollars, you need manpower. We need to coordinate this. And that's a big thing. I talked to a couple of the sheriffs, and one of the responses I got, one of the questions I got is, they said, what county are you from? I said, well, I'm from a lot of counties, a lot of different tribes. But he said, I'm up here supporting something that happened in my jurisdiction. I said, that's good. I said, those people in your jurisdiction, the guy's a cousin of mine, right? Even though he's down in Coppola, he's still a cousin. That's why I mentioned that I'm Hoopa, Yurok, and Karuk, and I am. And it becomes important when you think about it, because I said this happened to be in Mendocino County, but I said my daughter went down, picked this guy up down in San Francisco down there. The judge told him, we'd be a little more lenient on you if you go and go to get some anger management and get some counseling, right? Guy wasn't down there more than 2 days, called Emily and says, come get me, I don't like it down here. And left. Why? Because it's voluntary. I guess that time he shows up in court, they might do something, but it's voluntary. On the way back, they drag her out of the car and beat her up and kick her and everything else. The Mendocino County Sheriff shows up with tribal law enforcement, pick him up, and they throw him in jail, right? I guess the point that I'm getting is just because you have jurisdiction in one county doesn't mean these things aren't going to overlap. That's kind of the way it is with the Hoopa and the Yurok police when you're talking about jurisdiction. This group, if you can work together, would be great in terms of initiating something, getting together and work together. And that gets me to the second question, that's the investigation part of this. Who investigates? And where are they capturing this data and information? And in what database? And who's responsible for doing it? We had nightmares and everything because we looked at our daughter and nothing was being done. I asked tribal police, I said, who's doing the investigation? Who's writing this stuff down? One of them told me, I got a little notebook, I scribbled some stuff down. I knew darn well if we never got going on this thing, this would be a cold case. Here we are over 2 years later, and it's heading in that direction. And we're really apprehensive. We really want justice for Emily. We want something done. And this is where it starts right here, gentlemen.
Hello. Hello. Thank you. Thank you, Gary. I know how personal, and I appreciate you coming up here and sharing your story and your pain and your questions with all of us, because it is something that that we all take to heart, and I appreciate you sharing that with us today, because what you talked about is, number one, teamwork. We have a lot of resources. Even in a small county, there are a lot of resources, but you have to utilize and tap into those resources. We are all here together, shoulder to shoulder, to say that we all pledge to work together. Every single one of us in law enforcement here isn't big enough to handle anything on our own, essentially, and we need each other to help us. And so it comes down to building relationships, and I know all the North State Sheriffs, the Tribal Police, California Highway Patrol, state, national parks, every single one of us, if I was to ask, or if they would have asked for assistance, or if there needs to be coordination, every single one of us would be there, helping to coordinate. In the example of a missing persons case, you know, oftentimes we get the call 3 days later, and then it's catch-up time, and we have to backtrack, and we have to understand where this person may be. And speaking in general terms now, okay? And so when it's affiliated with tribal land, we have tribal resources. Chief O'Rourke, Chief Ramos are here. And I think they're a model of what tribal law enforcement can do in the state of California, being a public law 280 state. And mind you, 70 years of public law 280, and we still don't have it now. Okay, there's still issues with public law 280, and so we are trying to work those through, and we're dedicated to work on that. But that being aside, we deputize a certain amount of tribal police officers, and they are deputy sheriffs with both sometimes federal police officer powers, state and tribal authority. And realistically, they are the ideal person to handle these kind of cases on tribal land. And so it is something that even though they're tribal police officers, when they're deputized, they communicate with us and they're working for and with us. And so that's what we want to utilize. There is legislation that has been kicked around in Sacramento. It's been modified now. We're hoping that it gets changed, where tribal police can actually be recognized as state peace officers, where they could do everything that we do and get certified to do it. And so that's something that we are continuously championing on the Sacramento level, and that's where we meet you all, you know, for the departments like HOOPA and UROC that are capable, that already have state peace officers there. They could easily be recognized as a state police department, but they still have to go through the sheriff's office in order to get their affiliation. So Gary, you know, without taking too much of your time, teamwork is important, communication is important, and also, yes, writing stuff down and taking primary jurisdiction is very important, making that clear to the people that are reporting someone missing.
I would like to, can you hear me?
How about? Okay, so one of the things that was brought up too, and I think is important to note, is we as Native people, we all have connections between each reservation, each rancheria, and we know that. But yet, the investigating agencies were confined by jurisdiction. And that is something that, unfortunately, we have learned the hard way, and information didn't get put out to the agency or of jurisdiction. But something like today, we have county sheriffs from 6 different sheriff's offices coming here, working together to collaborate, so that way we're not as confined by that jurisdiction as we were before, because we're learning. And I think that's something important too, that each case that we're unable to bring resolution or bring closure, it hurts us and we learn from it.
The person I don't see up there, and I'm just going to bring her to their attention, is the Bureau, BIA. And I'm looking for clarity because when we first contacted that office with the tribal chairman from Hoopa, Joe Davis had said, well, we can't do anything unless we're requested by the tribe. I talked to him today and he just said, we can't do anything unless the sheriff requests us or asks for our assistance. Yet they have all kinds of resources. And so that we need to bring them in there and get them on stage and have them help and provide some of their resources.
Yes, that is very true. Being Public Law 280 state, the Sheriff's Office has jurisdiction, but we have what they call the Savannah's Act that is in place now, that we as the Chief Law Enforcement of the county, as a sheriff, can ask for BIA. Chris Lorenz is here. I've asked Chris for technical assistance on a case. Matt, who is he assigned to, is here, and he's going to be assisting us. And so they have, as federal partners, they have to stay in their lane in a Public Law 280 state because they do not have primary jurisdiction. And so we have to ask for their assistance. And there are certain cases where we have asked for their assistance and they're willing to help. And I appreciate Chris and Matt for their assistance, and they will be, assisting us on the case. Thank you, Gary.
Okay, we have time for one more. The food is ready.
So we are glad and I'm honored to be here. Thank you.
Ayuki, my name is Jasmine Hardy. I'm a victim services specialist for the Kadu tribe. We provide wraparound victim services, and our area is all of Siskiyou County and the northeast corner of Humboldt County. And we strive for culturally competent resources that are respectful of any cultural boundaries and accountable and community and family oriented.
Hey, I'm Hamolio de Puerto Ante, Olie, Daniel Vila Maston. Hello, all my relatives. I'm from the Hoopa Valley Tribal Office of Domestic Violence, Sexual Assault Prevention Program, MMIP Prevention Program, based out of Hoopa. We work with our service areas, the Hoopa Valley Indian Reservation, as well as the Canal Medical Center jurisdictional area. But we also can service Hoopa tribal members that live off of the reservation up to a certain amount of miles that they live off of that reservation. We also provide culturally relevant services for victims that are of crime. We also have the domestic violence portion and sexual assault program for under the civil grant, and then we also have family violence and wraparound services. So we have a lot of different areas that we cover, and I know that we'll go into that later. So I work with a lot of these people that are sitting here, these tribes, to keep our people safe. So thank you for having me here.
Aloha, I'm Kathleen Denal with the Tallawahd Nation Community Family Wellnesses Victim Services Program. I am the program manager. Our program serves the Delaware, Humboldt, Curry, Coos Bay, and Josephine counties. We also are a culturally based program. We help our victims to find safety and to help them to start a life over again.
Thank you. Ayuki, I'm Conrad Croy with the Quartz Valley Indian Reservation. I'm the domestic violence coordinator. Our services, of course, will extend as far as our tribal members go, but as far as our funding source, we are funded by the DOJ OVW. So if you enter into our program, one of the unique aspects is we cover anybody and everybody. We are, we do, go our tribal members, but we also, there's no limit to the resources that we could reach once you've entered into our program. I know that we would gladly collaborate with any of these other agencies up here, which even though we have before, but even continuing further. And then I can honestly say that we have assisted victims as far as Florida that I know of. So we have a wide range of services we can offer that are a little bit unique because we are a tribal government, but we're using government funding to access those services to local communities stretching around the nation. Thank you.
Miwa, my name is Tim Ruiz of the Kuya Band. I am the outreach coordinator for Strong Hearted Native Women's Coalition in San Diego. We cover mostly Southern California counties, which is San Diego, San Bernardino, Riverside, and Imperial. We are one of 20 nationwide coalitions, including Alaska. We provide domestic violence, sexual assault, human trafficking, and sex trafficking, and of course MMIP services. We do have, I believe, 4 shelters in place. There's 2 in San Diego, 1 in Riverside. We're opening up a few more with transitional housing. Our doors are open to anyone that comes through them or that are recommended through any agency throughout California or nationwide as well. Thank you.
My name is April McGill. I work at the California Consortium for Urban Indian Health, leading the Red Women Rising work. SCUI is a policy advocacy organization that represents 10 of our urban Indian health clinics here in California. So we advocate for policy change and funding for our urban programs. But with the Red Women Rising project, we partner with a lot of our DV network, such as Strong Hearted Women's Coalition, and others on the panel, also with our tribal communities around missing and murdered Indigenous women. And so yeah, that's what we do. Thank you. Oh, we're based out of San Francisco and Sacramento. Thank you.
Shimisanwe, my name is Morningstar Galley. I am a member of the Pit River Tribe. I'm here on behalf of our Indigenous Justice team. The rest of our team is right here in front of the podium. And so we have a number of events that are coming up and resources that we provide. Indigenous Justice is a community-based organization that supports holistic wellness and healing for survivors of violence. We are inclusive of all genders. We connect individual tribal members and intertribal community members to customize services. We provide support while weaving in our cultural practices and ceremonial traditions. And so it's an honor to be here with all of you today. See a number of families here that are providing interviews, and we help to support those advocacy efforts so that it's not a barrier for families to be able to advocate on behalf of their loved ones. So, Sisolai, thank you.
One thing that we have to do as victim advocates is we have to learn to be good hustlers because there's not enough resources. But when they were talking about limited resources,